Good afternoon, everybody. It's Wednesday, and it means it's time for our Go Digital Western Cape webinar. My name is Robert Davids, and I'll be your host for today's session. And firstly, I'd just like to say a warm welcome to everybody in the audience, and a warm welcome to our speaker, Deidre Samson, who I'll speak about a little bit more in a few minutes. But yeah, it's really good to have all of you with us today. For those of you in Cape Town, it's a lovely sunshiny day. So it looks like we've turned the corner and spring is finally on its way. So a warm welcome to all of you once again for our regulars, and then also to all our new members in the audience. It's really good to have you with us, and we're glad that you can share this time with us today. So as I had said, my name is Robert. I'm with the Digital Economy Unit at the Department of Economic Development and Tourism, and the Go Digital Western Cape series is brought to you by the department. Today happens to be our 23rd webinar. I think we've been having these since the end of April. So we in what we're technically calling our second season of the webinar series. And so on our 23rd webinar, we're really excited to have a really exciting and very interesting and very important topic to discuss with you today. Of course, you've seen the invitation, so you know the topic of today's session is baby boomers, Gen X, Millennials, Gen Z, how to engage with a diverse and changing consumer. So that's something which I think, as you are all from this community, specifically our SME community, this is something which is quite relevant to this ecosystem. And today we hope we're going to share some really interesting and some thought-provoking ideas with you. Before I go into the nitty-gritty of the webinar and get onto our presenter and the presentation, we usually have a few housekeeping rules. For those of you who are regulars, you know these by now, but if you could please indulge me specifically for our first-time audience members, we have a few little guidelines we just ask you to assist us with so that we can have this webinar run quite smoothly. Thank you very much for your cooperation. And yeah, so now we can get on to the exciting bit of today's session. Now, the topic of today, as I have said previously, is a very interesting one. I mean, those of you who are familiar with our Go Digital campaign know that we focus very much in broad strokes on digital transformation, digitalization, and digital systems and processes for business. But at the end of the day, it's still business, and it's the basic premises are still there. And that's why we've also included this topic today, because this is really about understanding the marketplace and the consumer. So understanding the marketplace is always important for any business. That said, we are now also 6 months down the line with lockdown and with COVID. And under COVID and lockdown, there have been significant changes from a personal or individual, society, cultural, social behaviors, new mindsets. And so this landscape, which we thought we knew very well, are going to be subject to some changes. So today's session is really created and going to be presented to try and help us navigate what is this consumer we thought we knew, and what is the potential behavioral shifts or the mindset shifts that COVID has brought through. But besides that, what are the generic aspects? Because I think while we're saying we're going into a new normal, there are going to be some things that nobody can foresee, and we need some guidance and tips on how to navigate this space. So today's session is really to help us do that. Personally, and I'm giving away my age here, I believe I'm a Gen Xer. I think I got that right. So I'll actually ask just because we like to have some fun also on these webinars, for members of the audience, if you are willing to do so, just in the chat window, just type which generational grouping you believe you are from, and I'll ask someone on our team just to keep track of that. So it will be interesting to see how many we have of the various groupings on this call. Um, and on that note, as I said, or as you can hear, I am not the expert in this, but that brings us to our presenter for the day, and that is Deidre Samson from Future Fit Consulting. And as you can see on your screen and on the invitation, Deidre is a futurist, a strategist, and an innovation specialist, which I think is an amazing description of the work that you do, Deidre. So Deidre, to you, a very, very warm welcome. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for all your time and effort in preparing this session for us. We're really grateful for that, and also looking forward to what you'll be sharing with us. So I'm going to hand over to Deidre in a few seconds, and I think seeing that she is a futurist, maybe she'll give us a look into her little crystal ball, which I know is not about predicting the future, but just some insights as to your thoughts on where this topic and this area of what we discussed will be heading over the next few months. So Deidre, I think on that note, if you are ready for us, I'm going to hand over to you, and you can take us through the next part of the session. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Robert, and thank you for hosting me today. I think it's a very interesting topic, and I had a really great time putting all of this together. I'm interested to see the chats coming up. There's a lot of millennials, there are boomers. I must say, my daughter thinks that everybody or anybody over 30 is a boomer. So she calls me a boomer. She says that's a boomer joke, and it's not really funny. So, yeah, so I think that's the real crux of looking at generations, is that we tend to generalize. So I'm going to kick off with sharing my screen. Yeah, I think today is really about the changing mindsets and implications on how we engage. And my role is really to just touch on generational marketing. As Robert said, the consumer that we knew a couple of months ago is not the consumer that is here and now. I will go into COVID. Every presentation has to have COVID in. And I think especially with the changing consumer. And then really focus on the consumer reset, and then really look at the tale of two. You can have generational bias, and where you, like my daughter, everyone's a boomer. So if everyone's a boomer, then they must do this and they must want this. And that's the problem with a lot of segmentation, is that we tend to think everybody is that way. And a lot of people ask me within my role, what do I do? As a futurist? Yes, some people do believe I have a crystal ball. I so wish I would be doing lotto numbers but what I believe that we do within futures and strategic foresight is really about sense making. And I love this image of the blind men and the elephant, because it's a different perspective. So if someone has the ear, it's a fan. The tusks, it's a spear or a wall or even a rope. And what I do is I look at the various parts and I paint a picture of what the elephant looks like. And what you'll see today is various different perspectives that I've taken from various angles. So McKinsey, Bain and Company, Kantar, and then a lot of other futurists within both South Africa and internationally. And I've painted my view of what I believe the consumer is going to look like, and how they are changing. And within futures, you always look at it from a systems perspective. Otherwise, you miss the parts and you miss exactly what it says. So, you need to look at the whole elephant to know either example me, or the elephant can become my friend and I can lead it in the direction which I believe it should go. And, if we look at, I'm going to go straight into the generations. You see baby boomers. I'm definitely not a boomer, 1946 to 1964. But it really is, about, if I have to be, state the obvious, it's you're born in a certain generation, you have certain values because of what you've experienced. So the Great Depression, personal computer came in at boomers, that nice big thing. DOS, the fall of the Berlin Wall, 9/11 experienced by the millennials. Gen Z, which is your 2020, is probably going to be the most affected generation. They have lived through 9/11. They are now living through the pandemic, but they're at school. So they're really, really impacted by this. And I will touch on it just now. But they also share a lot of common, so communication styles, buying habits, motivation triggers. But it's just about the circumstances up in. And if you look at generational marketing in the modern age, and this is before COVID, but I do believe that these have really, you've seen exponential growth in these comparisons. And it's really about the if you look across these generations, because it is driven by mobile. So where the young and the old are really united in technology-driven, device-defined world. So you need quick decision-making, you are inundated with information. And the behaviors across generations are more similar than not. Online purchasing, in-person experience might be a little bit more with boomers and the traditionalists, but it's still there and obviously has changed over COVID. Millennials and Gen X have the most similarities between them, and that's really to do with digital. Social is not just for the young. They might look at other things. So Gen Z is very much about TikTok, Reddit, Snapchat. Millennials and Gen X, more millennials are, they also on Insta. Well, most people are not on Instagram. I'm sad to say Gen X is Facebook. And that's where my daughter says I'm old and boomer, because nobody goes onto Facebook anymore. So I think it's also about perceptions of the generational marketing and how we so quickly put people in boxes. And that is the way we look at them. And going forward, it's going to be about understanding the values that are within the consumer and when they cross the generations. But what they're all looking for is really seamless digital integration. And we really need to rethink how we look at these generations. And age is really just one component. As I mentioned, the elephant. Age is just one of the parts of the elephant. And it means, if you want to look at generational marketing, it is what are those patterns that you're seeing? What are the needs? And deliver a customized experience as they move through the journey. And I will start to touch on the consumer journey when I mention COVID. And then people talk about the generations, different generations, how we're going to market. It must be the millennials. Then all of a sudden it must be Gen Z. They are the next. But you know what? The reality is consumers cross segments. It all depends on the occasion. It all depends on when I need something. Is it in the morning? Is it at lunchtime? Is it in the evening? And so the reality is I can belong to a whole lot of different segments. But once again, is what is the need behind it? What is my desire behind it? And that is what we're seeing is the change because of COVID. Because the reality is, all of a sudden, the consumer we knew, the consumer that played in their little box, has forever changed. And there will be things that will come back to, I hate to say normal or new normal, but there are things that will be forever changed. And we look at that lovely COVID-19, and the reaction from people is it a black swan? Did we see it coming? Should we have seen it coming? The reality is there were pockets of it wherever we looked. If you look at the World Economic Risk Report, it was there. What we underestimated was the impact it had, that it would literally shut down the world, that it would literally impact every single industry, every single organization, and every single individual. Nobody has been left untouched by this challenge. And if you look on the screen, you've got esports. So those Formula One drivers all of a sudden had to interact with each other digitally. You had scanning at the airports or at shops, where all of a sudden the way of life, food delivery, It's a norm now in South Africa as well. And it is that you can find out what the temperature is of the person that's delivering your food. So these are things that were always sitting on the edges, but have become part of our daily lives. And if you look at VUCA, it's really about the first one is volatility. The changes are taking place every day. They're unpredictable, they're dramatic, they're fast. It is very, very uncertain. And no one can predict or forecast what or when this pandemic will end. When will a vaccine come? Complexity, it's affecting every single part of our life, from a work situation all the way to a mental situation. So how we feel, how we interact. And ambiguity is probably the best thing, is there is no best practice. You know, we can't go and say, well, let's look at the SARS pandemic. Maybe we can learn something from that. The reality, that was quite a focused pandemic. This is something that we have never, ever seen before. Then obviously the most interesting thing is exponential. So Netflix was always sitting there. Netflix was always going to be probably the next best thing. It is now the best thing. Everybody is either on Showmax or Netflix. And the question is, will movie houses ever regain the foothold they had within this? Netflix is creating their own shows. They are us to binge watch. And not only that, they are fantastic at data analytics. They know what you watch. So they will then say, you've watched this, what about this? So they guide you. Their consumer journey is very, very good. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, you're seeing Netflix being worth more than ExxonMobil. I mean, who would have thought that this would happen? And that is just another example of exponential change that we're seeing. And there are going to be some incredible winners in this market, for example, Netflix. And there will unfortunately be a lot of losers, especially if we watch what's happening in the travel industry, in the tourism industry. And how are they going to pivot in the world that we live in now? And because really the pandemic pushed the fast forward button. It is the biggest crisis of our generation. And the reality is the decisions we take today will impact and shape the world for years to come. Because it's not only just about one section. It's the healthcare system, it's the economy, it's the politics, and it's people's culture. And there is a lot of, when we go through a pandemic, when we go through a crisis, we tend to almost look down and not be able to see what is going on outside. And it's what all leaders need to do over this time, is to be able to look up and say, what is going on and what impact will my decision have for tomorrow and the long term, both on the company, the industry, as well as the society and the environment. But the reality is the storm is going to pass, and humankind will survive. But the world that we live in will be very, very different. And it's interesting discussion when you have these topics and people say it'll go back to the way it was. I truly don't believe that we will see a world going back to that. People say, well, maybe that wasn't normal. Maybe we're going to the new normal. But that's quite a lovely philosophical discussion to have about what it will look like, because the reality is none of us know. And, I spoke about exponential change. We really have covered decades in a couple of days. I think digital transformation was the buzzword in most companies, but the reality is it really was something that was in a document for many companies. And digital transformation is years away. I don't see our company having to change anytime soon. And there comes COVID. And where some companies were online and they had a rollout for, that would be a couple of months, all of a sudden it had to happen in a couple of days. And I think what we're looking at is the period of contagion, self-isolation, and economic uncertainty, which we are seeing. We're seeing a huge amount of job losses globally and in South Africa, that is going to change the way the consumers behave, not just for now, but for years to come. And if you look at this this picture, and it's really the time we spent at home. So we work from home, we eat at home, we have entertainment at home. We don't really travel. Now we travel, but it's all local. And then digital coordination. And you can see in the greeny blue, those are really potential for growth. Now let me look here, my little thing here. And so it's potential for increasing behavior, and then the yellow is really a potential decreasing behavior. And if you look at working from home, traditional office space, sure, will it ever go back? You're having a lot of companies globally saying remote works for us, fantastic. Then you're having other companies where they go, remote doesn't work for me. I like to have people. I like to see what they do. I like to see that they're working. But I think this is going to change the commercial space to a big disruption. And if you look at it, it's going to but then the impact is the people that make furniture. Then what? Well, they need to pivot to make furniture for people who work at home. Eating at home, delivery service, food delivery, e-payments, so all about contactless. Entertainment, Netflix, I've already touched on it. Travel, everybody is revisiting local. Local is lacquer, and then you have the new digital coordination. So all this time at home is really the accelerator of the greatest transformation in all aspects of the way that we live, the way that we interact with people, how we exercise, at-home gym equipment, a huge spike, and it continues to be that way. How we learn, how we communicate. All of a sudden, you had children being on Zoom, you had children interacting with the teacher. And I think the sad thing is they also learned that if I mute myself, then maybe, and I don't have my video on, they don't even know that I'm there, and you find them doing other stuff. So I think it is a real different world that each and every one of us inhabit. And the negative part is the social side. So we have not been able to engage with people, right down, as I mentioned, to the Gen Zs who's sitting there and who really are going to be probably one of the most affected throughout this and in years to come. 2020, the dawn of the connected consumer. And this is a graph from Cantor on South Africa. And I do believe TV plus 42%. I think that's because we were watching the news. Either we wanted to see what was happening in South Africa or to see what Trump was doing and what he was getting up to. And in the short term, it really is optimizing media for the here and now. So what is the friendly home situation? So how do you look at TV on demand, streaming? Newspapers and magazines, we saw a lot of magazines closing. Newspapers, it goes back to, I have to pick up the newspaper that is sitting in a shop. Do I really want to pick something up? Has someone else picked it up? You're getting people who are very anxious. They want to feel safe. They want you to help them to reduce their risk. But the reality is there is an accelerated adoption of technology. And how are we as marketers, as innovators or entrepreneurs or owners of companies looking at this and saying, how can I pivot my business, or how can I capitalize on what's happening in the realm of technology? But the reality is the consumer has reset in so many different ways. You see fashion, they have the fashion week, and the model walks down on some instances, the model walks down the catwalk with no one there. Tennis players play a match and no one's there. And even if you think of the emotional impact that this has on the tennis players, so they are used to the crowds bolstering them, cheering for them. Now there is no one. And they talk about it being quite an impact on them from a personal perspective. And what we are seeing is obviously a global shift in purchasing patterns. This is really right at the beginning of the pandemic. Grocers obviously went through the roof. Pharmacy as well. So everything about what can I be healthy? What will make me healthy? How can I buy things to make sure that if I get sick, that I can come through this? And what we need to understand is what will be sustained, what will be temporary, and how is the mindset and the behavior of the consumer going to continue? And that goes back to what is the value behind it? What value does the consumer see? Is it convenience? Is it safety? What is it? And I think what we have seen is that online shopping has been across the generations. They have been forced to do it. And people have got used to it. Where they were once scared of it, it's now a way of life. So we need to pivot and make sure that we are able to respond. And if you look at Checkers, how they've got, you can get your shopping within 60 minutes. They have obviously evolved that a bit because of the increase, but they were ready for it. So how are you pivoting your business? How are you looking at what is the consumer? How is the consumer evolving? And how are you looking to see what will stay the same and what will change? If you look at South Africa, very much, this was a graph from Cantor which said, I purchased this for the first time this month, food and beverage, pharmaceutical products. So you can start to see that the trend, even though the graph I showed you earlier was global, it's very similar to South Africa. Some people say, you know, Africa's on the other end. We do tend to follow the patterns as well. Interesting, cosmetics, personal care products, clothing and accessories. People are finding it's actually not that hard to purchase these things if they don't fit or I actually don't like it. I just phone them up, they come and collect. So people are finding how easy it is, and that is what we've got to do, is create a seamless consumer engagement journey. How do we engage with people? How do we interact? Where are we touching them and making sure that they feel that it's seamless, that they don't go and say, oh no, this is just too hard, and they walk away. The change in consumer needs, and this is quite interesting to, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and very much you would have seen people moving from psychological safety, love and belonging. That is everything that we've always needed. And then as we evolve over time, we move to esteem and self-actualization. What the pandemic has done is it really has shifted that. And what we are seeing is safety and psychologically, this is never, ever going to be taken for granted again. Never, ever will we go and, you know, when it was just, well, obviously, I'll always be safe. I'll always feel safe. No longer. Love and belonging, that has been severely impacted by distancing. And it will return to normal. But what we will see is people are going to continue to crave connections. People are going to continue to crave I belong either to a tribe or to a community. Communities have become very, very important over this time. And what we're seeing is esteem and self-actualization. It's really about being deep prioritized during the pandemic, but as the medium to long term, it will revolve. It will have a different mindset. It will have a different priority about what sits there. And you'll see categories will start to change. So self-actualization and esteem was all about luxury. So what will happen is people will start to reprioritize what I deem to be luxury. What do I deem to be a spoil? Those type of things. We will become very much about what does it mean to me? How are you talking to me? And it will be, there will always be a strong desire to connect. We are, I think, you know, some of us sit on Zoom or on Skype all the time. And the concern is what happens if we move away from that? How will we engage with people again? A lot of people haven't seen anybody, when I say seen, physically. You know, what is the impact on the mental capacity of people, and they are talking about the second pandemic will be the mental breakdown. That is what we're going to start to see because of that lack of social connections. And to really look at this and understanding the consumer needs, you need to look at future fitting your business, your organization, to say, what are the scenarios of how this could play out? How could the consumer change within my industry for my products? You need to gear up your innovation pipeline. And it sounds almost like, you don't do that in a crisis, but in actual fact, you do. There are huge opportunities, and you can see how people are literally pivoting their business and capitalizing on the opportunities out there. And really, it's about anticipating change in the value equation, understanding the category demands. And the supply chains are definitely changing. You're seeing people going, all of a sudden, I couldn't get my supplies from international, and they've had to source local. People are going back to local, and it is all about how do we restart South Africa? How do we restart Africa? And that is about becoming self-sustaining. You're seeing it happening internationally. China is a great example for that. And the interesting thing is it's about collaboration. You saw a lot of competitors over this time globally collaborating, and yet there are still competitors collaborating on finding solutions for the pandemic, or collaborating on products and saying, how can we share our knowledge? And that is what's going to become very crucial, is what is that ecosystem of today and the future? Bain and company really looked at those elements of value that became crucial within the consumer. So it's all about reducing risk, reducing anxiety, and affiliation and belonging. So total link in with Maslow's. From a B2B, where we were looked at ease of doing business became very, very important, because people were going, we're struggling financially, people were not able to work or interact. So they looked for flexibility, they looked for risk reduction, stability, availability, reduced anxiety, and social responsibility. Social responsibility is a key aspect. And how do you respond to that? How do you look at that from a consumer's perspective as well as a customer? And well, why should we pay attention? It's really because this crisis is going to leave lasting memories in consumers' and customers' minds. Over the years, we have seen from World War II, new ways of working, 9/11, stricter aviation security, and then SARS was increase in e-commerce. The difference now is this has been global, and the impact will be seen for years to come. And it is reshaping our consumer decision journey. And, another irrelevant offer, it's like they have no idea where I am in my customer journey. The change beliefs are shaping new behaviors, consumer decision journeys, and new habits. And it really is about capitalizing on big data, understanding what is the data telling me about my consumer, where are they, how are they interacting, and putting that into consumer insights, which allows you to understand where is my consumer and how do I interact with them, what type of product. And the organizations that truly understand the what and the how of the behavioral shifts will be in the prime position to really shape their consumer and capitalize on this. And if you look at the consumer journey, it really is about rethinking it and adapting. So how is the consumer getting information? There is a total shakeup in the media mix. There's a big shift, obviously, to digital. How long will that be sustained? Will it be sustained? And how do I engage with my consumer if I'm not online? Consumer purchase, there is a total basket recomposition. There's a shake-up of the hierarchy of needs, which I touched on. And then the format polarization. So there could be big packs, small packs. I don't want to go out often, or I'm popping into my local store. So what is happening there? And that moves me on to the where. So where am I purchasing? Am I purchasing in big malls? Not really. So there's a whole channel mix. There's a mix between online and offline. And what is that seamless integration that we are going to be able to try and do from a digital perspective. And really, it's about the consumer experience in the end. So how are they interacting? What are the values? What do they really, truly value? And it's all about focusing on the fundamentals. So if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what are those fundamentals? Safety, security, reducing my anxiety. And I have remote work all the time. I have remote communication. How are you using virtual reality to engage me, to have an entertainment aspect? How are you looking at e-commerce and the digital migration? And you can see there have been companies who've been caught off guard who said, yes, I will look at it, without understanding that the environment is changing and continues to do that. And it really is about connecting and understanding me. We are looking at a consumer, a new kind of consumer that we're going to need to design a different aspect for. And you know, if you look at the concern for the health of the family or family members that have been sick, my basic needs, the stockpiling of toilet paper, to this day, I still don't understand it. The loss of freedom. You cannot go out now. You can go run now, but not there. You can't buy alcohol. You can't smoke cigarettes. And it is manifested in various different ways of how people have reacted to it. We have adopted new behaviours, but there continues to be a reliance or a yearning for connection and belonging. And I think the interesting thing is, if you look at the Gen Z, who are supposed to be seen as they've been celebrated for being fearless, for being resilient. The concern is they are the emotionally scarred. They are growing up in this world, which is really, you know, if you look at how would you describe 2020? Fear, anxiety, and that has been a constant in their lives. They cannot go see their friends. They cannot go interact socially, which is what they should be doing at this time of their life. What is the emotional stress and the long-term consequence of these consumers or a generation that is coming into the workforce environment? How are you going to interact with these? And, you know, what is the whole way they interact digitally is really rewiring the way they interact with information, with people. And it really is about demonstrating and understanding their values, being generous, creating joy, generosity, kindness, support, simplicity. And it's all about, how do you make my life easier for me? And societal purpose has shifted from a nice to have to an absolute ticket to the game. So they are looking, and I'm talking cross generations, to see what organizations, products, companies are doing to respond to this pandemic. You look at it, you know, futurists has always got to put a futures horizon on. You've really got to ensure the relevance for both today and tomorrow. And you've got to make sure that your organization, your product is strategically fit for now, as well as tomorrow and the future. And it is all about saying, you know, in the first horizon, it is purpose now, but understand that the environment is changing at such a pace. And that's what I've been really talking about now. And it will continue to do so. This is not the last pandemic. This is not the last crisis we will face. But it's about saying, what is that next phase that's coming? And that's very much the transition phase where the entrepreneurs sit. That's it's anticipating, it's capturing the value. And then to say, what are those pockets of the future? What are those wild cards? What are those weak signals that are actually sitting in today? The pandemic sat. They were pockets of the future that sat now. We just underestimated it. And it's about saying, what are those visions that we have, and how do we make decisions today that can, when we get to transitioning to the future, that we can make those decisions and start to anticipate a world that is desired both for the product, the organization, and for the globe within climate change. But that requires a different mindset, and it's motivated by values, beliefs, and a vision, both from a leader, a community, as well as from people. And in the middle, if you look at that in that transition period, it really is about a triangle of choice. So at the top, you will have your future that is really pulling you. That is your desire from where you want to go. At the bottom, the present is the push. So it's really about saying, what are those drivers of change that I'm seeing? How are they going to take me or force me to go to the future? Unfortunately, on the other side of the triangle, that's sitting near the first horizon, that is your baggage, it's your past. Those are the barriers for you actually moving to the future. We've done it before, it will never work. And it's really about the transition period is the most chaotic, because how do I go from where I am now, where I'm fit for purpose? Maybe it wouldn't have been the case in March, but how do I then transition to see, am I strategically fit for the world of tomorrow? Am I strategically fit for the of tomorrow as well as the future? And how am I looking at the external environment to truly understand what is happening? And really to bring it to make it practical and to bring it to life, it's really about a tale of two CEOs, where we can have generational bias, where we can say, the consumer isn't shifting. The way the consumer engages with technology is, we all engage with technology. We all want information. We all want to seek more understanding. And the reality is there's a wealth of information out there, but a lack of understanding. And in this example, I'm going to show you how two CEOs, one was caught off guard and one who's so, I think, very, very visionary. And obviously Nokia, I'm not going to ask who had a Nokia. I did have a Nokia. The nice thing about a Nokia, if you threw it on the floor, nothing ever happened. You throw an iPhone on the floor, it breaks. So, but literally what he said is, we fell behind, we missed big trends, we lost time. And they forgot to look at what was happening in the external environment. They forgot to look how the generations were changing. But that went as well to the attitude. So it's not just about the external environment. It's how you view the internal environment as well. Because they did have disruptive times, but they did not deliver on innovation fast enough. They did not collaborate. And you can see that coming through what I've been talking to you in the last half an hour. And you may be the leader at this point in time. So in Horizon 1, you could be the leader. The reality is you've got to be listening to get ahead. And that's what he said. And then you have a very visionary CEO. He spoke in January. I'm sure he never ever saw the disruption coming. But he said that the two biggest disruptions would be climate change, and look at what we are seeing, and digitalization. He truly believes that motor vehicles of the future are all going to be about an internet device. And oh, by the way, there's a car around it, or a flying taxi, but it's because we will be spending more time and we want to be connected. And his question to the company was, are we fast enough? And if he felt that if we continued at the current pace, that things would actually get quite tight, because he wanted to turn VW from an automotive group into a digital tech group, because that really does change your value proposition and what you offer. He wants people to come to VW and get that connection, to be always on. And that takes a new thinking and a radical change in both the company as well as the visionary leader. And what that means is you truly need to understand what the consumer values. So how has that consumer changed? And it's they were like, we have 43 phones. We have one for everyone. No one wants touch. You have to charge the iPhone at least once a day, while our battery lasts for a week. And that is the thing about bias, about generational bias, about a consumer's bias. And we truly need to understand, how has that consumer changed? What do they value now? And how will that evolve over time? Steve Jobs, he understood the function of the device was going to be fundamentally different, and that access to the internet was more important. But you have to be someone who is visionary. And in the automotive industry, a car is no longer just a means of transport. It really is more than that. It is going to be about a technology. And, there we go. There goes Tesla, I don't know if he's a visionary or madman, but he's got bankrupt many, many times. But he has pulled off some amazing things. If you look at Tesla now, he believes it appeals to all generations. And the interesting thing is the younger crowd are really, really being drawn to Tesla. In China now, in October, they had the 2020 Beijing International Automobile Exhibition, and he created a community video. He really, truly does understand his audience. He brought them together. He said, tell me what you like about my car, and I am listening to you. Apparently, from the colors to the features, the children, there was entertainment in the car, and there were electric cars. Obviously, the children couldn't drive them, but the adults, we understand the children cause havoc in the car. Now, all of a sudden, not at all, because the entertainment's there. In downtime, the mother or the father, or whoever's driving the car, could also be entertained. And they had on-screen games, they had Netflix streaming, and that is really about, so is it really about the car, or is it really about what sits inside? And then you can get a VW. They believe that Tesla or VW will become the most valuable company in the world. And VW has a one-up on Tesla at the moment. They've created a breakthrough in lithium batteries, so they're starting to lead in that. And what they have said, that in 5 to 10 years, they will be the most valuable company in the world. And they will have a little bit of competition, they say, from Apple, who's also going and apparently looking into this area, and Tesla. They also want to overtake Tesla by 2023 with electric vehicles. And if you look at this case study, it's really about understanding the consumer, how they're evolving, what are the generational differences, are there any, what are their pains, their gains, and how is your product still relevant to them, or do you need to evolve based on the changing consumer? And that really is where VW wants to come in. They want to say, is forget Tesla, let's learn from them, but then let's also come in. We are a strong brand. We have strong credentials. Let's come in and be the next tech company, even in competition to Apple. And I think just to end off, it really, we have to go back to Darwin. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent. It's the most adaptable to change. And during this time, that is truly, truly going to be the mantra for all those who need to survive. Thank you.
Deidre, thank you very, very much. That was, a masterclass, and thank you very much for sharing so much rich information with us. It was really a smorgasbord of great content and ideas, and I think I myself have about 27 and a half questions, which I know we don't have time for. And it was really, I think I'm trying to find a place where I can latch onto, but maybe to start with something a little bit lighthearted. You mentioned earlier you had a slide up about time from home and various or changing purchasing trends and what was purchasing, and it made me think that I suppose there might have been an increase in purchases of pajamas and perhaps tracksuit pants, because I think there's many on the call like this where it's business on the top and a bit of a party at the bottom. So, but I think sometimes those practical things, it's because as you spoke, I was also reflecting on my own behavior shifts and my own mindsets and how I've been influenced. So, yeah, I think while you've been able to show these big trends across the world and in business as a whole, you've also given us some very wonderful insight into the more things closer to home, which has been very valuable. So there's one or two questions in the group, but I thought I'd start us off with one or two also and get some feedback from you. As I said, there's so many touch points, but perhaps if I could start with a comment you made, which was quite powerful. You said the consumer has reset, and you also mentioned the consumer has evolved or is evolving, and that the consumer is rewiring. I mean, those are really powerful statements. And as a business owner or people working in the space, I mean, that's something that we have to take to heart very seriously because one, as you had spoken a lot about digitization and doing all this in the digital age, um, I think that the lack of physical interaction and the lack of being able to speak to your customer or to your client and all that moving into a virtual space where the normal signs aren't there, the little nuances and the tones of the conversation, it's going to become very difficult to not difficult, well, difficult to connect with people and understand. So one thing is that probably what I can take from that is also that we need to start becoming better listeners, but also listeners in a different way. And how do you listen in a virtual world? So if you have any thoughts on that, that would be very valuable. And then also earlier in the beginning of your presentation, you spoke about obviously the different generational groupings, and unfortunately for the millennials, they are associated with the on-demand culture. However, I thought, as you had mentioned, that those lines are becoming blurred, and there are gray areas. And do you think that there'll be a cultural shift to a kind of a more on-demand culture across the consumer base? And what does that mean for small and medium businesses, in your opinion? So maybe just some feedback on that, and then I'll take some questions from the group. Thank you.
Great. Yes, thank you, Robert. So the first one was about listening to your consumer and understanding. And I think what you've got to try and look at is how did you engage with them face to face? What were those touch points, and how do I recreate that digitally? And I think that is the way you've got to understand is how do I pivot that to become as seamless as an engagement. People are still wanting to do that in person, but the virtual is going to become very important going forward. So how do I still connect with that consumer, whether it be via a chatbot or via a virtual Zoom conversation, or what is that I get an SMS from someone, or I have an app, so it's what are those touch points that I can make virtually that I can still give the points of connection and belonging. And then the next one was the on-demand culture. I think that there is going to be a phenomenal change on that. I think that we are in an impulse generation, number one, across the generations and the on-demand. So we are now wanting something now. And now that every generation has got onto that bandwagon, I do believe that you are going to have to play in that. If you provide a service, you're going to have to make sure that that experience is simple, it's easy, and I get it now. I think in the beginning, people were less judgmental of things, and it's okay if the customer service is not great. Now it's no longer. Now it's like, really, I want the customer service and I want it now. If you can't do it, I'm going somewhere else. So those are the things that you need to consider.
No, great. Thank you, Deidre. Then there was a question from someone in the audience, Guy Harris. He asked, you may have seen this in your chat window, but he asked, which will be the winning industries? The survivalist ones, the intensive care ones, and then I assume this is or the mortuary ones. So it's an interesting question. Just maybe your thoughts on that, and then we'll start wrapping up.
I think that the survival ones obviously is all about essential services. So you saw even alcohol companies pivoting to sanitizers. So you've got to understand what is your consumer now deem as essential services, number one, over this period. And then when we go down to no lockdown, I think masks will be here for another year. But when we go into this next period, what does your consumer deem as essential to them? Those are going to be the ones that survive, and then obviously to bring it to them in a engaging and seamless way.
Okay, no, thank you very much, Deidre. I think I'm going to make one last closing comment because I am conscious of our time. It's on the dot 1:30, and then maybe if you have any last thoughts to share with us in the audience, that would be great, and then I'll wrap it up. So for me, as I said, the last comment from my side is you did touch on this, and I'm glad you did touch on it because I think from what you were saying, I could also see that there was kind of this period of immediate response and everybody uncertain what was happening and there was almost knee-jerk reactions. But we're probably going into the period of transition where there's going to be a bit of a transitionary phase over the next 6 months to a year before things really start settling. Because even though we may adapt new behaviors as an immediate response, it takes some time for those to settle in to become new norms or even get adopted as new values. So I think we're probably going into that transitionary period, and maybe to our audience and to ourselves to keep that in mind, that what happens in the next 3 to 4 months doesn't mean it will be that way for the next 3 to 5 years, but just to remain responsive and resilient and listen, as we had said earlier, and connect with our audience, even though it is in a virtual world. So that's just the last comment from my side. And so Deidre, I want to, any last comments or statements from you that you have?
I'm going to respond to Marilyn, who talked about.
Oh, sorry, there's Marilyn. There we go. Thanks, Deidre.
And I agree, it has been generally underestimated. They have potentially enough time on their hands. They have money, and I totally agree. I think baby boomers are becoming extremely important. And I think what happens is we get fixated on the next best thing. So millennials and our Gen 2020. And in actual fact, you've got to look at where does your product fall and how do you capitalize on it. And yeah, I think it's just about trying to understand what's happening in the external environment, understanding your consumers' views and values and needs, and then how are you going to pivot your business to respond to those. But yeah, thank you very, very much, Robert. I think it's been great putting the presentation together and sharing it with you and the audience.
No, Deidre, thanks to you. Yeah, as I said, it was great content, and I think we could probably have a discussion for another hour or so. So maybe just on that note, from our unit and the department, we really appreciate your time and the excellent content that you presented today. So to Deidre Samson, thank you very much. It's been great having you with us, and I just want to have some last words to our audience. So firstly, there's Deidre's picture. You can see again, I think I'm sharing my screen. I'm going to run a few slides at the end of this presentation for anybody who wants to know a little bit more about the Go Digital webinar series. So please just stay on the line and then you can see the slides rolling. Then once again, to our presenter, to Deidre, it was awesome. As I said, it gave us some insights into, well, for me personally, into my own behavior, but also to our business community. I think it's been really valuable content. To our audience, thank you very much again for joining us. It's been great having you here. We hope to see you around next time. And then to our digital economy team in the background, thanks for all your support and for making all this happen. So from us at the unit and the department, thanks once again. We hope to see you next time. So stay safe and thank you and bye-bye.